Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a completely counterintuitive idea. Ready for it? Your microservices have zero trust. And that is actually a fantastic thing. I know. We usually think of trust as the absolute foundation of any good system, right? But as we're going to see, in a complex network, assumed trust is actually a massive security hole.
Your microservices have zero trust, and that's a good thing. It's a simple premise, but man, is it jarring at first glance. I mean, as developers and architects, we spend all of our time building systems that are specifically meant to work together. We want our services to collaborate freely, so telling them to trust absolutely no one, it sounds completely backward. Why on earth would we intentionally add friction to our own architecture? Well, let's figure it out.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Part 1. The built-in security hole, or the danger of assumed trust. Which brings us to our next section, the old security castle, the castle-and-moat model. To really understand the danger of assumed trust, we kind of need to look back at how we used to design things. For decades, we built our network security literally like a medieval fortress. You've got a huge wall, a deep moat, and one heavily guarded gate, basically your firewalls. The strategy was straightforward, right? Just keep the bad guys out and assume absolutely everyone inside the wall is a trusted friend. But what happens if someone actually gets past that gate? Well, that brings us to a really crucial concept, lateral movement. This is when an attacker breaches the perimeter and moves freely between internal systems. Imagine an intruder somehow tricking the guards at the castle gate and then just wandering around. They go from the stables over to the barracks and then straight into the king's treasury. They're completely unchallenged because the inner guards just assume, hey, if they made it inside, they must belong here. In networking, a single phishing scam or even a tiny software vulnerability allows an attacker to bypass your main perimeter defenses. And once they do, the inside of the network becomes a total free-for-all. What should have been a minor breach suddenly turns into a front-page disaster. Now let's look at the chaotic microservices city and how this scales the danger.
Now, what's really interesting here is the stark contrast. Think about the old castle model. It's static, it has just a few buildings and a single guarded gate. But modern architecture, it's a microservices city. We are shifting the analogy from a quiet, sleepy castle to a sprawling, totally chaotic metropolis. This environment is highly dynamic. We're talking about hundreds, maybe even thousands of individual services, all constantly talking to each other and generating endless internal east-west traffic. In the city, buildings or, your services are being spun up and torn down in literal seconds. Their IP addresses are changing constantly. And this, right here, is exactly where the old castle model completely breaks down.
To put it simply, trying to secure this with old methods is like trying to manage downtown traffic with a single gate at the city limits. It just doesn't work. A firewall at the edge of your network is practically useless when the biggest threat is already inside, rapidly hopping between your constantly shifting dynamic microservices. It's an absolute security nightmare. So what's the solution? That brings us to the zero trust revelation, a truly game-changing mindset. If we can't just secure the city limits anymore, we have to change how we think about trust entirely. We have to ditch that implicit trust model completely if we want to solve that chaotic downtown traffic problem. So the new philosophy is simple, and it goes like this. Never trust, always verify. That is the defining mantra of zero trust. Never trust, always verify. It starts with a pretty bold assumption. Threats exist everywhere, both outside and inside your network. Absolutely nothing gets a free pass just because of its physical network location. Going back to our city analogy for a second, this means you don't just guard the city limits anymore. You put a dedicated security guard at the door of every single building. So the crucial point is what actually happens when you implement this mindset. The benefits are pretty much immediate. First, as we noted, you have a dedicated security guard at every door. It doesn't matter if a request comes from the service literally right next door, it still has to prove its identity every single time. Second, this creates a tiny blast radius for attacks. Think about it. If one service is compromised, the attacker can't just start bossing other services around because they lack the specific credentials to get into those other doors. The attack is securely contained. And third, it forces the principle of least privilege. This ensures the service only ever gets the absolute minimum permissions it needs to do its job and nothing more. Let's look at how verification actually works, the mechanics of zero trust.
Now, you might be asking yourself, how in the world do we actually put a guard at every single door without grinding the entire system to a halt? Well, the implementation breaks down cleanly into 3 steps. Step 1, strong identity. Step 2, service-to-service authentication. And step 3, policy enforcement. By using this 3-step framework, which, by the way, is often managed seamlessly by technologies like a service mesh, we can automate this explicit verification at a massive scale. So the system stays incredibly fast, but completely secure.
Let's look at that first step. Strong identity requires a verifiable cryptographic certificate, not a flimsy network address. As we talked about, IP addresses change way too often in a microservices city to ever be trusted. Instead, every single service is issued its very own digital passport. This is often done using standards like SPIFFE or SPIRE. This way, its identity is undeniable and completely cryptographically sound. Okay, so once a service has its digital passport, how do we actually check it? That's step 2, which is often handled by MTLS, or mutual TLS. This is a cryptographic handshake where both the client and the server must explicitly prove their identity before they can even start communicating. Now, unlike regular TLS, where only the server has to prove who it is, MTLS forces both sides of the conversation to verify themselves. It's kind of like a secret two-way handshake. And while MTLS is super common in service meshes, this zero-trust verification can also be built using other tokens for carrying identity, like JWTs or OAuth.
And finally, we arrive at step 3, policy enforcement rules. Because, just knowing who is talking isn't enough. We need to know exactly what they are allowed to do. This is where we define crystal clear access rules. For example, the payment service can talk to the database service, but the user profile service absolutely cannot talk to the database service. These strict rules are then checked and enforced automatically by the system. It dictates exactly who is allowed to talk to whom entirely without human intervention. Moving on to our final section, a truly resilient future. Intrinsic system security. Assuming nothing and verifying everything fundamentally prepares your systems for the wild, totally unpredictable world of cloud-native development. We're shifting away from the old way of doing things, which basically treats security as this brittle outer shell. It's like an eggshell model, right? If the perimeter cracks, absolutely everything inside is vulnerable. Instead, Zero Trust treats security as an intrinsic property of the system itself. Security becomes deeply embedded into the very fabric of your architecture, making it incredibly resilient to breaches from the inside out. So I'll leave you with this final, slightly provocative thought to take away from our time together today. Is your security a brittle outer shell, or is it an intrinsic property of your system? Really take a hard look at your own architecture. Operating your microservices with Zero Trust isn't a flaw. It's a fundamental, essential upgrade. If you want to see how this works in practice, maybe checking out a tool like Istio or Linkerd, definitely let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, stay curious.